Have you ever felt completely invisible? Like the world is moving on without noticing your pain? Have you ever cried in the dark, wondering if anyone even hears you? That moment when your heart is too tired to pray, but your silence screams louder than words, that's where we begin tonight's journey. In the stillness of night, in the loneliest corners of our lives, God often speaks the loudest. And this is the story of one woman whose tears became a prayer, and whose wilderness became a holy place. Welcome to Midnight Psalms, a space for souls who whisper their prayers in the quiet hours, when the world is asleep but your heart is wide awake. Here, we explore stories of deep emotion, spiritual wrestling, and silent victories, guided by the presence of God. If you've been carrying invisible wounds, or if you're walking through a season of silence, this episode is for you. Tonight, we sit with Hagar, her pain, her tears, and her encounter with the God who sees. Hagar wasn't looking for a wilderness. She was running from pain. Rejected, mistreated, misunderstood. She fled into the desert not because she wanted freedom, but because she couldn't survive the cruelty of where she came from. She was a servant, a foreigner, a woman caught in a story she didn't write. She didn't choose the role she was handed, but she chose to survive it. And in her running, in her desperation, God found her, not with lightning or fire, but with a question. Hagar, where have you come from, and where are you going? That question still echoes for us today. Where are you coming from? What pain are you escaping? And where are you heading, or have you stopped hoping altogether? Hagar didn't have an answer. She had no plan, no home, no protection. Only her tears and the burning sand beneath her feet. But in that moment of emotional emptiness, she met something more powerful than any resolution. She met the God who sees. Not the God who watches from afar, but the one who steps into our pain and sits with us under the blazing sun of our sorrow. This was not a quiet encounter. It was personal. God called her by name. He acknowledged her story. And he gave her something no one else had. Dignity. In a world that used her, pushed her out, and left her nameless, God said, I see you. Those 3 words can change everything. I see you. Not just your actions, not just your titles, but your wounds, your confusion, your lonely nights. And for Hagar, that changed her wilderness into a place of encounter. She called that place Bir Lahai, the well of the living one who sees me. Imagine how deep her healing must have gone in that moment. Her circumstances didn't magically change. She was still a servant, still vulnerable, still walking back into a painful environment, but her soul had been touched. God hadn't removed her storm, but he gave her the strength to stand in it. He gave her purpose in pain, and that's often what we need most. Not escape, not ease, but the assurance that we are not forgotten. That our midnight cries are heard. That our story matters to heaven. Hagar's journey is deeply human. She didn't pretend to be strong. She didn't pray poetic prayers or offer religious language. She simply cried. And that was enough. Maybe you've been told your prayers need to be perfect, or that your faith must always feel bold. But Hagar reminds us that sometimes all you can do is cry in the desert, and even that can move the heart of God. Because it's not about impressing him, it's about being honest with him. Vulnerability is holy ground. And tears are sacred language. There's something about night that brings everything to the surface. Memories you buried. Fears you tried to silence. Emotions that creep in quietly but hit like waves. Maybe you're in a Hagar season right now. Maybe you're running, or maybe you've already collapsed in the wilderness. Either way, there's a well waiting. A place where the living God meets the hurting. A place where your tears don't evaporate, they water something sacred inside you. A deeper faith. A quieter strength. A holy resilience. God didn't ask Hagar to perform. He asked her to return, but not empty. He sent her back not with shame, but with promise. A promise that the child she carried had a future. That she herself was not invisible. That her pain had purpose. Sometimes God doesn't lead us away from the fire, but into it, with a voice that says, you are not alone. And that truth can sustain us more than comfort ever could. When you've been seen by God, you no longer depend on being seen by people. There's healing in being seen. There's peace in being known. Hagar's cry in the wilderness became a legacy for all who've ever felt forgotten. Her story is not just ancient, it's eternal. It reminds us that even when life pushes us out, God pulls us close. Even when others name us by our mistakes, God calls us by our worth. And when we least expect it, in the heat of our confusion, in the silence of night, He speaks. He sees. He stays. Hagar's wilderness wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a deeper journey. She went back, not because her situation changed, but because she had changed. She had seen God, and more importantly, she had been seen by Him. That encounter gave her the courage to keep walking, to face what was behind her with the peace of knowing who was with her. And maybe that's the same invitation for you tonight. To stop searching for escape, and instead, open your heart to encounter. He is here, even in the dry, desolate places. We often think healing has to look like resolution. That will only be okay when everything around us settles. But Hagar teaches us that healing can begin before things are fixed. Healing begins when we know we are not alone. When we feel safe enough to stop running. When we realize our pain is seen by the eyes of love. And even though her steps were heavy, she now walked with a promise. God's whisper echoing louder than the shame or rejection that tried to define her. She was not just a servant anymore. She was a vessel of destiny. She was carrying a future. She had worth that no one could strip away. And in the same way, you are more than the roles life assigned to you. More than your past. More than your broken moments. You are seen. You are known. You are loved. Not for what you do, but simply for who you are. That's what Hagar's cry teaches us, that heaven doesn't need perfection, only honesty. And that when your heart breaks, God doesn't look away. He draws near. Can you imagine her walking back toward the place that hurt her? But this time, with her head lifted. With tears still in her eyes, yes, but now with hope in her soul. That's the quiet miracle of grace. It doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it purpose. And tonight, maybe your wilderness has been preparing you for a well of living water. Maybe the loneliness has made room for presence. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of God in the middle of it. That's holy ground. The God who met Hagar in the wilderness is the same God who meets us now. He doesn't wait for us to have answers. He finds us where we're lost. He doesn't shout from the clouds. He speaks our name in the silence. And if your soul is weary tonight, if you're tired of hiding, tired of carrying it alone, just know, your wilderness is not wasted. Your tears are not forgotten. The desert is not the end. It's where God writes some of His most beautiful beginnings. Maybe your cry has been silent. Maybe no one knows how much you've been hurting. You've been smiling in public but weeping in private. You've been strong for everyone else, but your strength is running out. Friend, you don't have to prove anything. Hagar didn't. She didn't have to pray the perfect prayer. She just cried. And God came close. And He will come close to you too. Not because you earned it, but because that's who He is. The God who sees. The God who stays. Let this be your BLA high ROI moment, the place where everything feels dry, but suddenly you realize you're not alone. The place where tears fall, but healing begins. Where you thought the story was over, but God was just turning the page. You don't have to understand everything to trust the one who holds your future. Hagar didn't know what was ahead, but she walked anyway, with the memory of a God who met her in the mess. Sometimes that's all we need. Just one moment of being seen. You are not invisible. Your pain is not too small. Your wilderness is not too far for Him to find you. God specializes in meeting us in the in-between, between what hurt us and what's healing us. And if tonight your soul feels dry, let His presence be the water. Rest here, in this quiet hour. Breathe. Cry if you need to. Don't rush it. Sometimes, the most sacred thing we can do is sit still and let God be the one who moves. Let Him carry you, the way He carried Hagar, with truth, tenderness, and promise. Tonight, in this silent hour, know this. There is a well in your wilderness. There is purpose in your pain. And even when the world doesn't understand your tears, heaven does. Hagar's cry became her calling. And your cry is not wasted. He sees you. He knows the whole story. And still, He chooses to meet you in it. Not after you're healed, but right here, in the middle of the ache. That's where grace lives. That's where God lives. In the quiet spaces. In the silent hours. If this message spoke to you, stay a while longer. Let it settle into your soul. You don't have to rush back into noise. Just breathe. Let God remind you that you are not forgotten. And if someone else needs this message, gently share it. You never know who might be crying in their own wilderness tonight. This is Midnight Psalms, and here, in the silent hours, we believe that every tear is sacred and every soul is seen. Rest now, and let healing begin.